Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Me Digas Zoom edition. Hola.
Hey,
So, in this episode, I brought back my dearest friend, Dr. Fernando Rodriguez.
thank you.
Welcome back, bitch.
Hey, boo. Uh,
So,
for the record, this is kombucha. So for those of you who know me, I'm no longer drinking, so no stories out there, please. Kombucha, here we go.
how are you? Quarantine? How's that going for you?
Oh, boo, it's surreal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think it's surreal, and yet also for me, it has been centering.
Mhm.
A lot of alone time, a lot of reflect time. I have to deal with my own shit.
Yeah.
You can't curse. Okay, yes, I remember. But yeah, it's week 7. That's where I'm at. So,
I don't even know what week. You said it was week 7.
week 7.
I haven't even been counting. For me, it's like what, Wednesday? Is it Wednesday? Wednesday.
hmm Yeah, Wednesday, week 7. And we're gonna talk about el muy guilty, ¿verdad?
Mm-hmm.
So where does that come from? Tell me, where does that come from? Muy guilty.
Well, when we did the podcast in the summer, which by the way, that was like what, the second time we actually hung out ever.
Yeah, it was really early on after we had just met. It's
So
yes,
like, we're almost gonna be like friends for real because we're gonna be friends for like a year.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
weird.
Connected by El Paso.
Right. Congratulations, you've lasted this long.
Mm-hmm. Igualmente, cabrona.
But we've been talking about doing Muy Guilty because that's one thing we didn't talk about the last time, and how Muy Guilty comes from feeling guilty that we left El Paso and that we are doing pretty much better than our parents. We're doing better than the other generation.
At a cost.
At a cost. Well, yeah, at a cost.
Okay, but now do you know how to say guilty in Spanish?
You know what? No, I didn't.
Qué pena, me da pena. Acuérdate, that's how you say it, pena.
Didn't we say that pena wasn't the right word?
No, yes, it's right. Así se dice.
Pena, me da pena. Pues yeah, that makes sense. Sí, me da pena. Pero ¿por qué te da pena? Dime.
Yeah. Um, well, for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that you were saying, which is an interesting start, right? And that is the whole notion that we're doing better than our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's where it begins, right? Like by using words like better and like, and we're in a better position or we're doing all of these things, right? I think the tension there is the implication then is an acknowledgement that our families came so far,
Yeah.
right? And it isn't about diminishing their experience, and yet sometimes that's what it feels like.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
I mean,
so,
we get reminded constantly by our parents.
yeah. And also, I just want to pause and say I'm giving you full El Paso realness right here. El Paso Chihuahuas. I wore my hat just for you and did my tank for you, just for you, Tor.
What did you call yourself? This is your top look?
Cállate. Yes, that's so funny. That's so funny. But pena, guilt, um, I think starts off with that journey of the what was ingrained in me is you have to do better, right? Like this whole notion of the American dream, and your family came to the States, you're first generation. For me, and I think we share this, it's a background of poverty,
Yeah.
right? And what does it mean to be perceived being the key word, that you're like making all this money and you're like there. So it's so, yeah, wherever you want to go, I'll go right with you, boo.
Yeah, well, the thing is, for me, I come from a background where um, for like my family's success meant that I would be able to help out in the family and help pay bills, help support the family. That was kind of where I was being moved towards.
Mhm.
And I did not want that life because I I mean I love my family, but I mean if they were to have it their way, I would still be in El Paso working at that call center.
Yeah.
Um, like staying a manager and making I wasn't even making that much money. I was making like decent money. It was like I was making like what 10.45 an hour, and like at the time in El Paso that was like good, you know?
Yeah, I remember those
But
companies when they went up. Yeah.
yeah, but that's not the life I wanted. I didn't want to work at a call center. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like plenty of people work at call centers and they make it and they have like fabulous houses and you know, they're living like their lives in El Paso and they're happy. But it's just for me, I wanted something different. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be, you know, the thing is, I wanted to be like in Sex in the City. Like my goal was to move to New York and
Yeah.
hang out with the girls, like at the coffee shops, have brunch, and you know, go shopping. And the thing is, in El Paso, that's not really the lifestyle. Or actually, it wasn't when I was there. I think now it is. Like coffee shops weren't a thing when I was in El Paso, but they are now, kind of. Whereas in Minneapolis, coffee shops like are on every corner. You know.
Yes. Okay. So can I point something out to you, which came out in the first time we did this episode?
Mhm.
There's a lot of I's, right? I wanted to do this, and remember, one of the tensions that we talked about was like this whole like, what do you mean? There is no I, right?
Right.
It's all about the family. It's all about the culture. It's all about like how this is where you stay. You're gonna stay here. You're gonna graduate here. You're gonna get back in a very um, culturally relevant way. I think
Yeah.
that from another perspective is somewhat limiting, right? Somewhat limiting. So what is the root of your guilt?
That I left. That I left my family. I left my parents. I left my brother.
Mm-hmm.
The guilt comes from I moved on to pursue my dreams and I pretty much didn't look back. Because it wasn't just my parents like giving me shit for leaving. It was also like my friends, my coworkers at the time were like, "Why are you leaving when your parents need you? Like they supported you, they were there for you, and now you're leaving."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I want something else. I want more than what El Paso can offer me, you know?"
Is the and because I'm trying to relate in because I know we have similar experiences, but there's nuance there because I left when I was 18, right
Yeah,
after graduation. Were you already out when you left?
I was, well, kind
Meaning confirmed, like more from like the white normative out, like you had you said it to your family? Had you done that whole like ceremonial, like now I'm officially gay?
no, it was, I came out to my friends at 16. I came out in high school at 16.
Yeah.
I came out to my mom at 19.
Mm.
And my dad, I never really came out to him. But I mean, at this point, I'm pretty sure he knows. If he
Mhm.
doesn't, Dad, I'm gay. Uh, or
Mhm.
queer now. Ooh, explaining that to my parents, that's another story. Um, but yeah, I mean, I left, I guess, halfway out of the closet.
Mhm. Mhm. With one tacon on. Well, and the reason that I ask is because the root of my guilt is my gayness,
Mm,
right? My growing up recognizing that I just was not going to fulfill the expectations that my family had for me, and not just my family, just the culture, the community. It's this like you're supposed to do this very specific thing. And one of the things that is also important is I was not out when I left. And at all. Well, I mean, con tacones y todo, I mean, sure, I hadn't done the whole ceremony, right? But I'm sure everybody around me suspected it, right? I mean, I know that they did. But
You were
so
in a glass case closet when you
yes,
were.
yes, yes. But the reason that that's important is because you know what, Tor, I would have never left had that not been a part of me, had my gayness not been in the picture. And actually, I would have never left El Paso if my father had not been in the picture, right? So part of what allowed me, if I want to use that word, to make the decision to leave is first I saw what happened to my brother, right? I've talked to you about how my parents kicked him out when he was 18. I saw that and knew that that was going to be what was going to happen to me.
Yeah.
But then, you know, my parents were in the middle of the divorce, and when my dad left the house, that's the first time that I felt able to be more fully myself, right? Because I'm very much a mama's boy, right? I would have never left my mom if my dad hadn't have been back in the house. But what pushed me to finally leave and to say fuck it to the guilt, right, was I'm not going to be in this house with this man who embodies a masculinity. I mean, clearly I wasn't thinking that academically back then, but now I can say it, like, who was embodying a masculinity that is bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and so the root of my guilt begins with my being gay, and then part of like what once I left El Paso, the whole guilt was around I actually needed a lot from my family.
Mm.
And every time you know, they gave me what little money they could periodically throughout, but it never felt good when I had to ask my family for money that I knew that they needed and that they likely didn't have.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like a double, and worse, sometimes I had to make that ask of my father, right? Whom I had that difficult, horrible relationship with.
Yeah.
And so there was that guilt and there was that tension about it, right? And I'll stop right there. So that's a little bit about what my root is. Yeah.
Um, do you think it's ever gonna go away?
No. How guilty do you feel right now
All
in the midst of this crisis, in the midst of, you know, El Paso, and just Texas overall? You know, I think no, I don't. I think I'm guilty all of the time.
the same.
Every time I pay my rent, I'm guilty.
Yeah.
You know, every time I buy a piece of furniture, I'm guilty.
Same.
Yeah. So no. Uh-uh.
Yeah, well, even going to therapy, because I go to therapy, and it's still, I mean, it's helped a little, but yeah, the guilt, same, the guilt's never going away. It's just, I've just learned to cope with it better.
Mhm.
Um, and my relationship with my family has improved. Like, this last Christmas, I didn't, well, I guess I was gonna say I didn't dread going home, but I mean, I did dread it a little bit, but it actually
I
was.
remember.
But it wasn't bad though. My trip home wasn't bad. It was great. I mean, granted, yes, there was a little. We got me and my mom get into a fight, of course, but I mean
Picked up.
that happens. It's
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
natural. It wouldn't be El Paso without a fight, you know.
Right.
But I think about though, what my life would be if I was in El Paso right now, especially during quarantine. Like I
Yeah.
would not be, I don't think I would, I mean, I wouldn't be okay. I
Mhm.
just the limited resources that I would have to, I would, I'm going to call it entertainment,
Mhm.
be very limited. It's just, it wouldn't be a good place because the thing is, when I was living in El Paso with my parents, my life wasn't what I wanted, and I keep saying that, but there were like I would work at a call center, and then I would go home and I would stay up till like 2, 3 in the morning, like on the internet, just like looking up shit, just
Mhm.
random stuff, and then I would go to bed and wake up at like what 10, 11, and then go to work around like 1 or 2, and that was like my life,
Mm.
especially because I didn't have a car.
Mm.
And then I did have friends, but it was just I hate. depending on other people for things. So
Mhm.
it's just I was very dependent on like my friends for a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
It's just, and also I was like 300 and some pounds. I mean, I was fat.
Mhm.
Um, because there's really no such thing as dieting. There was no such thing as dieting in my household. So
Mhm.
it's just, and like I even feel guilty like that I've lost all this weight, because I did it on my own with my own terms. And that wouldn't have been possible in El Paso.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you said a lot. One of the things that I was thinking about. So the question that I have for us to think about is, how do we cope with it? But also, I was thinking about my guilt in terms of it's an accumulation of guilt at the various phases in my life, right? So first, it's the guilt of being gay. Then it's the guilt of leaving my mom and going to college. Then it's the guilt of having to ask for resources that I know that they didn't have. Then it's the guilt of staying over the summer because I was involved in leadership opportunities and I didn't want to go back, right? So like the whole idea that I would go back, right, continue to cause that like guilt. Like, what do you mean you're not going to come back for the summer? Then when I graduated, I remember when I graduated, I actually had an internship in Florida. So I left Austin, Texas before my parents left, right? Which, by the way, was the first time my father had been on a plane.
Oh wow.
So the guilt of, oh, now you're done. And now, the expectation was you're going to go back.
Yeah.
Then that didn't happen, right? And then, oh, P.S., now that that internship is done, I'm going to live with my brother and then I'm going to go to Chicago. So for the last 18 years, now almost 19 years, right? Every time, right, when I've needed to make a decision about a career move, about continuing my education, about what's going to happen, right, and where is my life going to be, it has been an accumulation of various levels of guilt that I've needed to kind of deal with, right? And I think for me, part of how I dealt with my guilt was drinking.
Mm,
I was a boozer, right? That was my one of the ways that I dealt with it, which wasn't healthy, right? Obviously, but there are some scripts that I've shifted in my mind about how do I deal with the guilt, right? Around leaving El Paso, which I can share a little bit later. So, what do you think about that?
well, I mean, you're talking about booze. Like, yeah, I used to be. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but I was like, I was.
Abusadora. You were an abusadora.
I guess I was an alcoholic abuser, but it's because in El Paso, that's all there is to do. Like, you go out to dinner or you go out clubbing, and I mean, that's all there is to do. Again, at the time that I was there, you know. So there wasn't really a lot of options. There wasn't a lot of ways for me to escape my situation. So yeah, I would go out and just fucking get wasted. I mean, oh my God, there were times that I was working at this call center. I would go in at like 5 in the morning and I would just get fucking shit faced and then just like not go to bed. I would just tell my friends, let's go out to eat. And then if you can just drop me off at work and then I'll just,
Mírala.
oh
Wow.
God. Well, yeah, I was coping.
Mm, yeah. Wow. That's so wild. Not that I ever did that in college or anything. But yeah. So what do you feel guilty? So here's my another thing that I was thinking about is, and I don't know if this is necessarily guilt, but I want my family, my sister in particular, who really hasn't visited me, right, in all of the places that I've lived in, Chicago, Indiana, New York, San Antonio, Florida, right, and now Minnesota. I feel guilty that I am not able to share some of the really cool experiences that I've been able to live, right, in ways that I want, right? So I'll never forget when my brother and my mom traveled to New York City for my graduation from NYU. And I was able to, I took them all around, and my mom was walking everywhere, and my brother and my tia was there, and my tío was there, my Aunt Chayo and my tío Gilbert, hey, were there. And those are things that many people take for granted, and that have access to that, right? For some of us, those opportunities might come in the form of a celebration of a graduation, right? If they happen at all, right? Because I work with many students who are not able to even have that experience. But so what I'm saying is, right, like in all of the places that I've lived, the experiences that I've seen, the beautiful locations that I've lived in and experienced, there is a sense of I want the rest of my family to also experience them. I
Yeah.
want them to see it and I want to share it. And when I go home, and maybe you experience this too, right? Like you don't really, I don't really feel at ease talking about those things because my fear when I go home, one of the things that I balance is don't bring yourself too up, Fernando. No te creas mucho, Fernando. No te creas muy, right? And that all of that to say, right? Like I try to really temper, like, oh, it's
Your
fine.
yes.
Don't be extra. Temper what?
You try to temper your muy muy-ness.
Yes, don't be muy. Thank you. Yes, la muy. Yes.
One muy.
You know what I mean, right? It's like you don't. There's just a lot that you don't talk about.
Well, the thing is, so I grew up with my mom always calling me muy muy, even when I was
Oh, you are muy, girl.
more fun. But I mean, like I've always acted like I've always had a certain air about me that I've
Mm-hmm.
have some
Yeah.
sort of arrogance about me, which I've come to embrace, like whatever. So I I feel for me, I've always been in this position where I never felt comfortable, like no matter like where I was in El Paso, just because I have an interesting dynamic in terms of like my family, like my dad's side of the family and my mom's side of the family. Whereas I feel that my dad's side of the family see me, I mean, for a long time I felt they saw me like trash, that I wasn't,
Wow.
that I wasn't up to par for them. you know.
Interesting.
And yet on my mom's side of the family, I felt that they thought I was too muy muy for them.
Mm.
So it was this interesting dynamic growing up that I just never felt that I fit in on either side. And I think that has like that stuck with me all these years. So going back, it's just I don't feel comfortable there.
Hmm.
So and like yeah, I am starting to feel guilty that I didn't make an effort to get close to any of my relatives. But I don't know, that comes and goes because
I don't feel that guilty. No, I'm playing.
I mean again, it comes and goes because again, like it's a two-way street, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So um so yeah, we're just talking about muy muy, like it's just people always thought I was muy muy, even when I was like, when I wasn't socially muy muy, when I was poor. They still thought I was muy muy bien creída.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I want to talk about money.
okay.
What when when they thought I was poor and like the muy ness and all of that. Um, so I mean, there's no question there, but I want to talk about money because I think that um, some of the pena that I feel, if you will, is around perceptions of money that people have. Right? They think Dr. Rodriguez means money when it really means Dr. Debt, right? Student loans, 3 degrees, all that shit. But then there actually is money, right? Now I actually, like there's there is, right? And yet, how do you deal with that, right? The kind of all of that. There's no question there, but that's a topic that I think lots of people avoid and don't really talk about.
So for me, like I'm a struggling artist. Like I'm not well off. I'm not poor. Like I'm doing okay. I can't say that I'm living comfortably, but I'm doing okay. But with my demeanor and my sense of fashion, I do
Thank you.
I do come off as, it I look I look expensive, from what I've been told. But what people don't understand is like all of this is I never pay full price for anything.
Thank
Like, like I spend every item that I own is less than $30, and even then, like if it's like $30, I'm like, oh my God.
you.
But it's just it's I guess it's that notion of like looking like trash, coming from, you know, my relatives and stuff, that I just never, like, I can never look like trash. Like,
Oh, interesting. Hey, were you a church girl? Was your family like a big old church thing?
No, I mean, so I'm going to go with no, but I was forced to do all the Catholic things. I did, I did the Holy Communion. I was confirmed, so we did have Sunday school, which that's a whole other thing because me and my best friends, luckily, were in the same class, and we tortured the teacher. She hated us. She called us the devil. Um,
They weren't wrong.
it was awesome. But but it was all bullshit though, because we're supposed to go to these classes. We're supposed to like confirm that we're Catholic, but like none of us gave a shit about any of it. Like, so, you know.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question about church and about like your whole I'd be curious to see to hear from you what does trashy look like from what you're envisioning. And the whole thing, like I look expensive, right? Because it's funny, I learned all of my classism shit in the church, right? Because my family, we were hardcore every Sunday, Wednesday, Friday Bible studies in the church, all of that good stuff. And we needed to be dressed to the nines every time that we went to that church, right? So this perception, right, of like the perfect family. Again, I think I've mentioned that my father was a deacon. He was a big preacher in the church, loved our family, was like, so there was this idea that we had some sense of class in terms of money. I think we had a lot of capital in the church. But as I've thought about, to your point about half price and all of that, boo, I pay full price for everything most of the time. And
Wow.
part of that is because, so no, I mean, and I am a bougie bitch, right? And here's why. Because when every time the car broke down or every time something was wrong with the house, we were poor. And my father did his quick fixes and it broke again. And I remember holidays, if my brother watches this, he's gonna laugh his ass off. If my sister watches it, my mom, they're gonna know exactly what I mean. We would dig up, the plumbing pipes because he was gonna do it himself and pick. And so part of what I have internalized, right, is when it comes to my car, when it comes to, places around my apartment, furniture, things like that, right? I do buy the best. I will pay to go take my car to a mechanic. I will pay to bring somebody in to fix things or etc. Because it's part of that. I'm gonna call it trauma, but I don't know if it's that right word. Pero todas las veces que él trató de arreglar algo, every time he tried to fix something, it was always fucked. And I remember having that shame around, oh, he would pick me up. My dad would pick me up in his white truck that was just like a crumpled up piece of shit.
Mm.
And it would make a noise. And I remember feeling really shameful every time. And, I hate to admit all of that, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And I think now in the way that I conduct myself is shaped a lot of what I learned in the church, the way that I dress myself. I love dressing up, right? Head to toe, all of that. But like, I do think that in the pieces like this couch, for example, that are going to be with me for a while, right? I am muy when it comes to those things because I'm not going to buy another couch for another 15 years, 20 years, maybe even. This is it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is where I'm cheap, right? I buy it once and I don't replace it, right? I pay up front right there y ya se acabó, right? Si no te gustó, pues ya.
Yeah.
So, So yeah. And by the way, all of that I just said is entrenched in guilt,
Yeah.
right? It's entrenched in guilt because no, Fernie, you shouldn't buy that coffee table. You should send that money to your mom. No, Fernie, you shouldn't buy this. You should, every time I make a purchase, it's like, well, you should really be sending it over, you know?
God, no, I'm the opposite though. Like I don't feel guilty. Well, let me talk about clothes, because clothes for me has been like traumatizing, not just because I was 400 pounds, but
Mm,
it was just because we were poor, so we couldn't afford like the nice things.
mm,
But also, though, I was restricted from wearing what I really wanted to wear because
oh, yes.
of the gayness.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a lot of things that I wasn't allowed to wear. So, I spent most of my middle school and high school years just wearing like polo shirts and like baggy pants. A, because that's the only thing that fit me, and that was like the only thing that we could afford in my size.
Mm,
But B, that was the only thing that my family was willing to buy me because I wasn't allowed to look a certain way. So
mm,
when I started working, I started working at 18. uh,
mm.
and yeah, I would go shopping with my friends and I would buy my own clothes. Oh my God, I was obsessed with Gap. I even had a Gap card. I was like,
Gap was so like the most expensive place, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you couldn't go to the Gap. You couldn't go to the, yeah, no.
I
Hell,
was
I went to Walmart and Kmart, boo, and maybe JCPenney if I was lucky.
right. Mervyn's was like the thing. Well, actually, I went to Burlington Coat Factory a lot because that's where the bigger clothes was, and it was cheap. Actually, I'm surprised like a lot of people didn't go to Burlington because that clothes is very reasonably priced and like very, very cheap. Um, but yeah, and of course I would get criticized by my parents, like why are you wearing that? Like, I mean, just like the littlest things. I would wear like an undershirt, and an undershirt is supposed to be white and like whatever, but I refused to wear white undershirts. So my undershirts were like yellow, orange, like, and I would be all fashionable about it. And of course, my dad would be like, why aren't you wearing a white undershirt? And like even my grandma too would always like judge me for like wearing like color.
Mm,
And so I mean in terms of clothing, I don't feel guilty anymore about buying it because for the longest time I wasn't allowed to wear it.
right, okay.
Well,
Hmm,
it's too flashy for them, I'm sure.
yeah. I have another one for you.
Mm.
Unless you want to drive, or can I drive for a little bit? Okay. Kids, the wedding, the partner, the wife specifically, right?
Yeah.
I've largely let go of that guilt, if I'm being frank, right? But it took a while
Mm-hmm.
to know that I was never going to have the big church wedding with, I don't know who's going to wear the wedding gown. That would have been me. But, there was a lot of guilt and every time I went, I remember every time I went back, the subject would come up. And do you have any thoughts on that? Did you experience that or?
Well, I mean, I still have guilt behind that. Not getting married, but it's not having kids because my mom loves kids,
Yeah.
and she's not a grandmother.
Mm,
And that is one thing that I do feel guilty about
mm,
because she always wanted to be a grandmother. And even to I mean till this day she's still like tells me like why don't you well now she's more accepting, so she's like why don't you adopt, and I'm like well mom, in order for me to adopt I would need to find a partner first, so if you find them tell them that I'm waiting. You know what I'm
well, what's funny, like I still haven't let go of the thought of kids.
mm-hmm.
And I think I've told you that. I think I've talked with you about that. it's still there. It's still something that, you know, I've set out a goal, an intention, right? And if it comes to fruition, awesome. And whether or not I have a partner, right? I don't give a fuck about that anymore. Fuck that, right? Like if I'm gonna be single, I'm gonna be single. But
I cannot be a single parent. I just can't do it.
well, there's that too. But I mean, I, I know I could do it. I know I could do it. But um, it's interesting because I think that, you know, I have a niece.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel guilt around children, right? It is less about my mom, because I don't know that my mom wants another grandchild, if I'm being completely honest. It's more about like my brother and my sister and my niece, right? Um, and and I have reflected more recently on like, do I have a kid? Do I want that in my life?
Yeah.
Um, but for sure, if that decision were to be a yes and it would come to fruition, it wouldn't be for them; it would be for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I've always been the type of person that didn't want the whole family. Like I didn't I didn't want the house with the picket fence and the dog. That's just not the life I ever wanted. Um, and I think it was because of the way I grew up with my parents. I mean, I'm gonna spill the beans, but I mean, it really wasn't a happy marriage. So I mean, it was just constantly like arguing and fighting, and I mean, there's a lot of trauma behind that just it's ruined like what a home means, to people, like
Mhm.
just I don't I don't want that life. I never did.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to get married though. Like I'm still like holding on to that, but
Like a heteronormative wedding, like walk down the aisle and like say your vows, like okay.
I mean, I would I don't know if I want to walk down the aisle. I do want to have a wedding. Like I don't want to wear the dress. Like I don't want like a big white wedding, but um I don't know. I want to get married and I do want a wedding, but I don't have it planned. Like
Yeah.
I just depends on who I meet and like what we would decide. But I guess for the longest time I was fighting um
Mm.
heteronormacy. I was fighting the whole notion of like getting married and buying the house and getting the dog and then having kids and like for me I was like, ugh, no. But I don't know. I think things are slowly changing, but what I've come to embrace with my queerness is that queer relationships have the I'm not saying it right, but like I'm gonna say that they have the opportunity to pretty much make their own rules in terms of what marriage and a relationship looks like.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
um, like so many queer couples that I know that are happy, like they're in open relationships. They, it's very what would my mom say? It's very risky and like I told my mom about open relationships and she's like, well, what's the point? Like you're supposed to be with one person,
Shall we explain?
you know.
Hmm.
That's one thing that I've come to embrace with being queer is that I don't have to follow the rules that I was educated to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some rules or like some notions that I do want. Like I wouldn't mind trying monogamy for one.
I love how you say it. I wouldn't mind trying it. Okay.
Well, I mean, like it's that's the thing. I never wanted like the big wedding or the house, but I did want the relationship. I did want like I thought I was gonna meet him in college and then we are gonna like be married and then like, spend the rest of our lives together. And when I went to college, that didn't happen.
Mm.
Actually,
I
when
thought I thought I met him a few times, girl. I was wrong. Hell, yeah. I don't know. I don't
I
even know what to say about that. Like, unless you have a question for me, I'm gonna have to say no comment.
So
Do
do
you
you
have a question for me?
feel guilty being single?
Hell no. Hell no. Let everybody hear that. No, I don't feel guilty being single. I feel fabulous being single. However, I'm gonna be 37 next week. I said that out loud.
Yeah.
And that's my real age. I'm gonna be 37. Um,
Next week? It's already gonna be next week?
Next week, May 8th,
Wow.
Taurus. Do I feel guilty being single? That's an interesting question. No, it's an absolutely not. But I'm not gonna lie. I feel like all right, boo, what the hell? You're gonna be 37. I'm basically a dinosaur in gay years. So there is a sense of well, I'm not the most patient person in general, but I'm getting impatient with what the universe has in store for me in that realm of relationships and love, right? And I've been pretty open about this with my friends and talking about this. We've talked about this. Um, uh, so there's that. I don't really know what else to say other than that. But I'm also very aware that pressure is not coming necessarily from within me, right? It's coming from like everything else that's happening around the world, right? Like I'm getting older. I finally have some stability. Now I have time to think about like, oh, what does now there's actually like, wow, I might live past 40. And I don't say that lightly, right? Like I actually am now thinking 20, 30, 40 years down the line. But to your point, right, what I know for sure is this whole heteronormative bullshit is not going to work for me. It hasn't worked every time that I've tried to do it. And so I certainly am, I have been hurt enough. I have hurt enough. I have made enough mistakes to know that like, okay, your relationship, Fernando, however it manifests, is not going to be comparable to anybody else's relationship, right? It really, to your point, which is what I think you highlighted, right? Like you get to decide what that looks like for you,
Right.
and by you I mean the two individuals involved. But no guilt, girl, no guilt at all. Mm-mm.
Um, so do you get pressure from your family to have kids? No.
No, it's funny. The last time I was telling my mom, so I was asking her, what if I adopt, et cetera, et cetera. She's like, he wasn't having it. So no, there's no pressure. And I think by now my family really sees me as someone who's really independent and kind of does his own thing. And
Yeah.
no, there's um, no, the truth is that I've always thought I would have 3 daughters.
Really?
Yes.
You have names picked out?
No, but I have careers. I have like different personalities for all of them. Yeah, I remember being very young and thinking that I was going to have 3 daughters.
I always thought I was going to have a son and his name was going to be Dimitri.
Dimitri. Okay.
Yep. The only reason is because I saw this movie, this like Daniel Steele novel that turned into a TV movie called Lucky Chances or whatever. But one of the characters' names was Dimitri, and he was like this hot daddy character. Which like years later, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Gosh, you're going to name your kid after a hot daddy that you saw when you, oh my gosh.
Yep. I mean, not anymore because Dimitri's like a Russian name, so I was like, well, maybe it should be more Mexican, but but maybe one day I'll have a pet and I'll name it Dimitri. But yes, my mom still asks, and she remembers the name because she'll be like, "Where's Dimitri? When is Dimitri gonna happen?" And I'm just like, "Oh my god, I regret ever telling her that."
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with that? Like, when, in other words, like when that question comes, or is it a like, no, that's not going to happen, and then you feel more guilty? Is it like, do you string it along, or like?
Actually, like I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure like the last few times it was more like a an awkward giggle, and I just changed the subject. Like,
I know that well. Yeah, okay. Chicos? Chicos tacos?
yes, but it's because it's a constant reminder that I am single. You know what I mean? Because that's one thing that I keep telling my mom, because it's my mom. I love you, mom, but like she's the one that keeps like bringing it up from time to time, and like it's like you're just reminding me that my life didn't go in the direction I wanted it to. Thank you. You know.
Yeah. Do you feel guilt around being single?
Uh, I do.
Mm.
Um, just because I was brought up like and like it was religion and family that being single means that you're selfish.
Mm.
Not having kids means that you're selfish because that's what you're supposed to do. That's how you help out in the world is you procreate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um I mean, there's a little guilt. Like, I mean, it's not ruining my life, but I mean, like, truth be told, there is some guilt behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah.
Mm. So we're in our mid 20s. Um, and here's the deal. Like, here's what I'm envisioning. Someone's gonna watch this, and they're gonna resonate with the guilt piece, and they will have heard all of the ways that we're guilty, and blah blah blah. But my question is, okay, so what the fuck? What do we do with it? How do we cope with it? What have we learned from all of these years of carrying this guilt with us, right, up until this point? That's the question that I have for us to really think about. So like, what now?
Go to therapy. Like,
Yes.
I'm being really truthful about that because the thing is, I didn't go to therapy for a very, very long time. So I
Mm-hmm.
started going to therapy, what, like almost a year ago? No, maybe like 6 months ago. I don't remember, but like not, not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because therapy wasn't like, Mexicans don't go to therapy, like
Yeah.
you can get, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to like go to church. You need to pray. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you, a therapist is not going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's how I've been coping with the guilt is I've been getting professional help.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about it because that's the thing. Like you and actually, that's how you and I kind of bonded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Yeah.
so
I'm pretty sure I'm the one that pushed you to go to therapy, boo.
yeah, I
Or
think
one of the ones, not one of them.
you're one of the ones, but I think you were the one that kind of you were like the cherry on the guilt.
Because I was also going to therapy at that point, which reminds me I need to schedule. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do with this guilt? Talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hide it, and don't be ashamed about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, truth be told, everybody has guilt. Like we're all guilty.
Oh, for sure.
We're all guilty. We all feel
Yeah,
guilty.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I've met some pretty not guilty assholes out there. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they feel guilty. They just they hide it well.
Okay.
Um, but it's just one of those things where like you just have to embrace the guilt and just as
Hmm.
weird as that may sound,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
because that's not gonna go away. But like the thing is like when I talk about like my family, like I didn't realize that's how I felt until like years later.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I felt that they thought of me a certain way.
Mm,
Um, so, and it wasn't until like I left all of that and like kind of looked back at it, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I recently connected with like some of my family, and like honestly, it still wasn't comfortable for me. And like they weren't being rude, they weren't being mean. It was just it's a different world for me that I'm not a part of anymore. And I mean, do I want to be a part of it? I don't know. You know.
mm. Um, gosh, it's funny because I've said this, right? I would love to go back to El Paso.
Yes, I know.
I would love it. I would love to go back to El Paso. Um, so over the years, and I alluded to this earlier with my whole kombucha joke, but like one of the things that I didn't realize until the last few years actually is how much guilt has played a role in my alcohol abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, like I am by no means am saying that that is why I abuse alcohol. No, it was one element, right? That I was drinking away because every time that I left, it's funny, I left El Paso to go to Austin, and then I went from Austin to go to Florida, which was further. And so I'm not getting closer to home, is my point, right? Then I went to Chicago, then I went to Indiana, then New York, and I remember the first time that I actually felt like far away from home was in New York.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, it felt like, and also New York just makes you feel tiny and small, right? I just felt like the dread of one, my financial situation at that point wouldn't lend itself for me to just fly to El Paso if there was an emergency.
Yeah.
That sense of I can't get home if something horrible happens, right? But every time that I have gotten further away, I think the guilt has manifested itself in a different way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things, so what do I do with that guilt now is first, I'm in such a better place than I have ever been in my life, right? I can actually say finally, right, the last 18 years that you starved, that you drank your ass off, that you made mistakes, that like all of the crap,
Yeah.
right, has landed me in this situation, right, which is a far better situation that I could have imagined for myself. And because of that, the way, and don't judge me, but one of the ways that I deal with the guilt is now I actually am able to give back in certain ways, right, to my family, right? I actually am able to I don't want to say the word provide because that's too much of it. That's too much of a big word. But sure, like I think if there were an emergency right now and my sister called me up or my brother, like I would actually be able to support.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels for me, it's a reminder of, okay, the last 18 years, as tough as they were, and by the way, also like lots of fun and lots of successes and all of that, but we're talking about the shit
Yeah.
now, has been worth it, right? And so now I think I'm in the healing phase of my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? After beating my body up and beating my spirit up and going through the trenches and all of that, like now I'm like, okay, now for 18 years, I'm gonna have to heal that shit. That means therapy. That means physical well-being. That means, radical honesty. That means tough conversation. That means, all of that. Going back to El Paso and like healing all that shit there. So I think that's what I do with it. I try to change it from guilt to action items, right? Like, okay, make a decision about what you're going to do in this situation. Are you going to give the money or are you going to say no, and for a really an intentional reason, right? So that I guess that's the only answer that I have. And a part of the reason why I ask us that question is because, I work with students all the time, right? And I know because of what they share and also because of what I observe, right, that many first gen students of color, right, have a lot of guilt for leaving their homes, their moms, their grandparents. Ooh, let's not even talk about the abuelitas,
Uh,
you know, right? And and that's important, and that's why it's so important that you're doing this tour, right? To talk about the stuff that I don't know that people really want to talk
no,
about,
they
right?
don't. It's well, because it's hard. It's hard to talk about these things, you know.
Is it? I don't know. Maybe I'm just old.
It's not hard for us, but I mean, like, it is hard because a friend of mine did one of these episodes with me, and like afterwards, they they were like, how do you do this constantly? Like, how do you put yourself out there all the time? It's so,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It's just, I just do, like, you know. But again, it's because for the longest time I wasn't allowed to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, shit, I'm doing everything that I was forbidden to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna fucking talk about it because, well, you know, you work with students. Like, there's so many people out there that feel the same way we do, and we don't talk about it. They don't talk about it because that's we were educated not to. You know, we're educated to hold in our feelings. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and just follow the rules, and also don't stick out. You know, blend in. um that's what we're taught to do, and I'm here to let everyone know that no, fuck that shit, like, you know, like, let your freak flag fly if you have one, like, embrace who you are, and yeah, feel guilty about it, but like, still, like, you know.
Well, I mean, for so long, I didn't even know that it was guilt.
Right, exactly.
You know, I didn't know that that is what was happening for me. I didn't know that,
Yeah.
right? I have another thought, a pivot, if you will.
Okay, what is this pivot?
It's about our Mexicanness and
Mm-hmm.
guilt around, you know, we for all intents and purposes, we have largely cut, right, the ties to the border. And I don't mean like literally, right, but like, for, you know, I've been away from home for 18 years now.
Yeah.
Right? I go back to El Paso and I feel like a stranger, right? We've talked about all of these things, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts are, if you experience any guilt around loyalty to whatever it means to be Chicano, to be from El Paso, to be Mexican, Mexican American, Latinidad, right?
I don't feel guilty about it. The thing is, I embrace it more though, because,
Mm.
you know, because in El Paso, you don't know you're Mexican because everybody's Mexican.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
You live in Minnesota and you're like, oh shit, I'm Mexican. Because
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly reminded that you are not like them, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you, like, when I first moved to Minnesota, I lost myself for a while. Like, I had no, like, it was such a huge culture shock. Like, I was like, holy shit. And also, I realized that I really didn't know my culture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about me. I didn't know about my history, my ancestors. So I took it upon myself to learn. Like, that's why I got a Chicano studies minor, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I learned to embrace it. What makes me sad about it is that the culture sometimes doesn't accept me. Like, it's still pretty homophobic. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
we do come from a very homophobic community.
Mm-hmm.
So, and honestly, things are getting better, but there's still that, you know, there's still that, I guess, like, it's la cosa that, you know, it's not right, it's not okay to be gay,
Mm.
you
I
know.
have some Whitney in there, boo. It's not right, but it's not. Okay. Yeah. Well, you know, I do now taking this outside of family and, you know, all of that. Well, maybe no. Actually, that's a lie. This is especially about family. And when I think about my dad, you know, from Juarez,
Mhm.
never refused to learn a word of English.
Yeah,
Right, very adamant that we were Mexican.
yeah,
It was very intentional about ensuring that I experienced Juarez, and, you know, that's where we did all our shopping, and it went, you know, crossing back and forth, and so Juarez was a huge part of my growing up. Um, there is a tension, and I know we've talked about this before, but like this tension around one, you're Spanish.
yeah.
And I feel the guilt comes out anytime I am in spaces where the expectation is that you know Spanish and that you speak it well, right? Because I can speak Spanish pretty well. But when I go to El Paso, right, that Spanish is largely broken.
Hmm.
And it isn't just guilt, it's also shame, right?
Because they
There's
feel shameful though.
Oh, well, you mean they make you feel shameful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I told you the story of like the dude who was like, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought that you were Latino. I would have thought that you were white." But
Yeah.
you know, and it's interesting because like I referenced grandmas,
Mm.
right? And I don't know that this is guilt or not, but you know, my grandmother on my father's side passed away when I was a child. I want to say like before I was 10, maybe even. Um, and you know, in my older age, I've recalled memories of her cooking, of her gardening right outside of her really little humble apartment. And I've thought, and maybe it's a combination of guilt and also maybe jealousy, like feeling really shortchanged that she was not in my life longer in comparison to my brother and in comparison to my sister, right? Because my brother especially picked up so many of the cultural pieces of her indigenous practice, right?
Mm.
Um, my understanding is that she, was a white witch, right? And did like yeah, con los huevos and the sage and all of that. And in my older age, I have actually somewhere like in conversations with my brother, like started to do some of those traditional practices, and yet not having a direct connection. Not It's just about what I'm realizing she taught me without even realizing that I was being taught, right, as a kid. So there's guilt for me, or again, I'm using guilt, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. There's guilt for me around um, not taking the time over the last 18 years to really connect to that history,
Yeah.
to her practice, specifically on my father's side. And I think, to go back to to the question I posed of like, well, what do we do with it? I think now is the time for me specifically to start really exploring what that means, right?
Mhm.
Because I've always burned sage and palo santo and things like that, and I don't know where it comes from, right? It's just like it's here somewhere,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Well, in terms of traditions and like things like that, like my grandma on my mom's side taught me at an early age that you must moisturize, otherwise you look really old when you are our age right now. And as you can tell, I do not look 38 because
You're 38.
I'm 38. Oh, I know, people think I'm 27, but
Mhm.
I mean, like the thing is, so, like my grandma, like was like, she taught me well, like moisturize, use aloe, do the oatmeal mask, drink
Mhm.
this, drink that, and my mom too. So, I mean, it's a little different than what you're talking about, but I mean, some of those remedies and stuff really have helped improve my fabulousness and
Yeah.
keep me looking muy muy. Although
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm only muy muy in appearance.
Mhm. Oh no, boo, you're muy muy all over.
All right, so we have come to like the end of the episode.
Mm.
So, Fernie, if you can tell the community something, word of advice, words of wisdom, what do you want to tell the community? What do you want to tell la comunidad
About guilt.
about anything in general?
Um, let's see. Do, do, do. I think the thing that I would say is um, keep your eye on the prize.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was invited to do a talk. Actually, you helped me practice this talk, and I started off with a reflection of me sitting at 18 years old, a week before I graduated from high school, looking out of my bedroom window onto my dad's 1967 Ford Fastback Mustang that he had spent thousands and thousands of dollars, mind you, we were poor, to fix. And I was sitting there in tension and excitement and dread because I was leaving to Austin the next, like the next week. I was going to graduate and then I was leaving to Austin. And so I referenced kind of what the journey has been, right? In the trenches, and it's difficult, and I've moved around and I've abused alcohol, and I've done a lot of other shit that I'm not proud of. But I've done a whole lot of shit that I'm so proud of. I've experienced so many incredible things. I've met so many awesome people. I have, I cannot believe that I am sitting across from you, Tor, right? Doing this Zoom thing in Minnesota, the Twin Cities.
I know, how the fuck did we move here?
Yeah, with my El Paso Chihuahuas hat, with my sarape draped behind this beautiful. So what I'm saying is, in the midst of all of that, it's worth it. And the thing is, that's the one thing that I never, ever, ever lost.
Yeah.
I didn't know it would look like this, right? I knew that it would be okay and that I would be in a position to one day give back beyond what my community has given me and what my family has given me. And by the way, this isn't it. The journey continues.
Yeah.
I'm going to do bigger and greater and more awesome things. And I believe it. And it's going to come with guilt. It's going to come with difficult decisions, but I know that it will have been worth it. So keep your eye on the prize, boo.
Bueno, pues, Fernando, thank you so much for doing the show again. And for everybody watching out there, thank you so much for watching. I thank you so much for your support. And at this time, I'm going to say adios.
Adios. Bye-bye, boys.